It's 7 p.m. And I'd like to call the February 22nd, 2021 City Council meeting to order. Because of COVID-19 restrictions, our meeting tonight is being held virtually via Zoom. Public comments for this meeting were accepted in advance by mail and email. These comments will be read into the public shortly. If you would like to submit public comment for our next meeting, please visit www.merriam.org and follow the instructions and directions listed there. As a reminder to the City Council, please be conscientious of others trying to speak. Speak slowly and clearly and state your name prior to speaking. If I need to confirm something that I may have not heard, I will ask for clarification. And the format for the council consideration on items tonight will be staff presentation. Then we'll open time for the council questions. Please hold questions till the end of the staff presentation. And if you have a question, then when I ask, please physically raise your hand so that I can see that, that you have a question on video. The next point of order is our Pledge of Allegiance. And we will show the flag on our screen. And then I would ask everyone to please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. Julie, would you please call our roll?
Yes. Mayor Sissom.
Here.
Councilmember DeBold.
Here.
Councilmember Hands.
Here.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Here.
Councilmember Nath.
Here.
Councilmember Neal.
Here.
Councilmember Pape.
Here.
Councilmember Silvers.
Here.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Here.
Very good. Next item on our agenda is our consent agenda. Wait a minute, excuse me. Before that, let's get our public comments. Julie, would you please read any public comments that were submitted in advance into the record?
We had no public comments submitted this evening, Mayor.
No public comments this evening. Very good. And we'll move into our consent agenda, and all items under the heading are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests, in which case that item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separate. We have 3 items on the consent agenda this evening. So I'll ask to see if anyone has the idea that they want something removed for individual. Bruce, would you please? You get your mute on.
Here we are. This is Bruce. I'd like some clarifications on item 2 and 3, so I'd like both of those removed, please.
Very good. Well, that being said, then we will just go ahead and, unless there's anyone else wants to speak, we'll go ahead and enter a motion to accept item number 1, which is approval of the minutes by Pape. Be sure you take your mute off when you speak, everyone.
Sorry. I apologize for that. I'd move that the council approve consent agenda number 1.
We have a motion. Chris Hands, or second?
Chris Hands, and I second.
Motion made and second, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Nath.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Aye.
That motion passes. The second item is consider approval of an interlocal agreement with Mid-America Regional Council for Planning Sustainable Places Grant. Chris, did you want to take this, or Meredith? Or maybe we should ask what your concern was, Mr. Caldwell.
Yeah, I can answer the question, or Brian can. He's online too. So,
Go ahead, Bruce.
Okay, just a quick clarification or check my understanding. From what I get from this, we are entering into this agreement with Mars to, and they are going to project manager and hire a consultant to do the actual study. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, this is
Okay.
excuse me. That is correct. They are the ones that will be acting as project manager for it.
Okay. Okay. I'm good with that. I just wanted to make sure that was correct.
You're right. And just real briefly as to why they take the lead in that, because this is comes from state transportation funds, would ultimately come from federal transportation funds, which in brief have a lot of strings attached to it. And Mark is very familiar with administering these types of funds and grants, and it just makes it much more simpler and straightforward for everybody involved, since they have the technical expertise to really make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed when it comes to these types of funds. So that's why they do that. They really let the cities in all the cases, you know, do the project in the fashion and the manner that works best for the city. So obviously the city will be doing the review of the consultants and doing providing our choices and stuff like that. But yeah, they do it simply. It's worded that way just because for the main leave, so they had the technical expertise to make sure that we.
I just wanted to make sure I understood the relationships of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mr. Silvers, did you have a question?
I had a clarification as well. This is Councilman Silvers. I was just curious, does the Merriam Marketplace meet the standards of the local activity center outlined in the agreement, or would it be all of the downtown area?
It is all the downtown area.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion for this item. Mr. Caldwell?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Mid-America Region Council's Planning Sustainability Places Program.
And Bob, you have a second?
Yeah, this is Councilman Pape. Second, Mayor.
Motion made and second, Madam Clerk.
Member Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Nath.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Very good. Last the three on the consent agenda is consider approval purchase of 2 police cars. Again, Mr. Caldwell, do you have some questions about this?
Yeah. Just quick, again, clarification. The amount budgeted was around $95,000, and we're spending $63,000 for the 2 cars. Will we spend the rest of the money outfitting the cars so they're usable for police cars?
Laughlin, police chief. No, we have budgeted 3 cars. We're only buying 2 right now. We're holding off buying the other one until probably the 3rd quarter or 4th quarter of this year. The money to equip the cars comes out of a different line item, and we'll be within budget to equip all those cars.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a comment. It's nice to see we're purchasing these vehicles from a local Merriam dealership, so that's nice. That's usually not the case. I'll entertain a motion and a second for this item. Mr. Caldwell?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the purchase of 2 new vehicles for police department.
Mr. Pape?
I'll second, Mayor.
All right, motion made and second, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Nath.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Very good. I didn't initially have anything on mayor's report, but I have decided to add an item, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, just very briefly, about the consequence of good decision making. You know, our city is very lucky that we make a vast majority of the decisions that turn out to be good decision making. In some cases, our decision making is great, and we reap consequences well beyond what we expect. And I'd like to talk about a decision that was made 4 years ago when we decided to hire our assistant city administrator, Meredith Hauk. The reason why I'm talking about this tonight is because, no, we don't want to embarrass her, but this is her last meeting. So this will be the last time we get to see her smiling face on Zoom and likely in person. You never know, but more than likely. But I'd like to talk just a couple of minutes about why I think this was such a great decision. And I'm just going to list off 4 or 5 accomplishments that she was very much involved in. Probably the most prominent was being a project manager on the community center project. She coordinated also in the co-location of the future Merriam branch of the Johnson County Library. This is something that she was very, very involved in, and I mean day-to-day involvement for weeks, months, seemingly years, through all of the ups and downs. She was the point person. Not only did she do a fantastic job with this, and you don't have to go very far to see that that's the case, but I've heard from her boss just how much work she got to do that kept him busy doing the things he was being hired to do. So that's the primary thing. Here's some other things. She led the communications push for our successful community center sales tax and the 1.25 cent street and stormwater sales tax renewal. Obviously, that tax will net benefits many, many years in the future. And communication is the reason why it succeeded. That and the fact that we have a very kind, dedicated citizenry. But they wouldn't have voted positively for it if they weren't reasonably sure it was a good idea, and that takes communication. Meredith facilitated several art projects in her 4 years, and I think all of them are running now. Is that correct? Are they all running? Okay, so they're all running and up and going, and so I think we can certainly look upon those things and see what's been created. She updated the city's performance management process, which is a pretty important thing. It's mainly deals with the inside of staff and administration, but one that takes a high degree of professionalism and knowledge. And the last thing, she's initiated our current web site redesign, which again takes technical knowledge, dedication, and also reaching out and to all the people that helped her do it in and outside of City Hall. So Meredith, thank you very much for being an employee with us. There's no regrets other than the fact that you're leaving. And on behalf of the citizens of Merriam, I wish you the greatest of luck. And thank you again for all your faithful service.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It is, I think I've said this last time, but it is certainly bittersweet to leave. I enjoyed all 4 years, some days more than others, but in general, 4 years at the city of Merriam. And I'm really excited for what's next, but I feel very fortunate to have worked with such a great team of staff members with the city. And then of course you all have been a wonderful and supportive council along the way. And that, I don't know if you know what a difference that makes. I've worked in other cities where that hasn't always been the case, and knowing that no matter what project I was bringing before you, there would be good questions and kind conversation and lots of input really made my job easy. So I really, really appreciated that along the way. And I will be back to visit. I absolutely have to come see the community center when it's up and running 100%. So hopefully we'll get to see each other again in person at some point.
Be great. Well, again, thank you very much.
Yay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Next item is council items. First item is consider approval of small cell facilities agreement with AT&T. Mr. Engel, could you provide us with an update on this item?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Next item on your agenda is a master license agreement between the city and New Singular Wireless PCS, doing business as AT&T Mobility, for the placement of small cell facilities within the city's right-of-way. Those that have been around for a while will remember or recognize that traditionally what we have done is we have provided or entered into franchise fee agreements or franchise agreements with utilities, the telecoms, historically to operate within our right-of-way, which basically spells out our obligations between the parties for operating in the right-of-way. Due to some statutory change in 2019, we no longer, at least for small cell technology, use franchise agreements in the state of Kansas, maybe elsewhere, but definitely in the state of Kansas. So over the last maybe year, perhaps even a little bit longer than the last year and a half, a group of 7 Johnson County city attorneys have worked together to develop a master license agreement with some input from AT&T. Clearly, AT&T, as all small cell providers, would like some sort of uniformity across cities. It makes doing business a little bit easier for them. While at the same time, the cities all have the same interest in protecting our right-of-way and making sure that disruptions in the right-of-way can be addressed, and that the usage and the rental, if you will, of space in the right-of-way is adequately the taxpayers adequately compensated for that. So this is very similar to a franchise agreement. This will have a 10-year term, just as most franchise agreements do. There'll be 2 auto renewals for 5 years, unless one of the parties chooses to terminate the agreement. This is really about operating and obligations within the right-of-way. This is not about placement. This is about location. This is not about will this be a monopole? Will this go on a light pole? Will this go on a building? Those will come forward to the city in other agreements. And most likely those will be administratively approved, as they have been in the past. So again, this is more very similar to a franchise fee. So the provider would come in this particular case, AT&T would come in and say, we want to use this type of facility in this location, and we would work with them on if there was a place that they could attach to. If not, is there a mutually agreeable place and method of placement of their facility somewhere in the right-of-way? So that would come forward at a later date. Overland Park and Lenexa have approved this agreement already, and there are several other cities that are in the pipeline for approval. We have Paul Snyder and Chris Carroll from AT&T on the call to answer any technical questions. Again, this agreement is not so much, it's not very technical in terms of what type of monopole or frequency or things like that. But if you have questions about that, I'm sure that these gentlemen can help you, or at least we can point you in the direction of getting those answers. I'd be happy to answer any questions or elaborate any more if there were any specific questions about this agreement.
Does anyone have a question? Mr. Neal?
Yeah, this is Councilmember Neal. I have actually a few questions. And so I don't necessarily need to go first, but I do want to ask a few things. This is kind of one of the really important decisions that you make over the long term. We are embarking in a new era where 5G technology is coming to Merriam, and the infrastructure necessary for that is apparently going to go in, with AT&T taking sort of the first bite at the apple, if you will. And so I do have some questions. For the last 3 years, I've been serving on the National League of Cities Information Technology and Communications Committee, and that's one of the things that we've been dealing with. There's been there's been a lot of evolving tussle between local control issues and some of the efforts that the telecom folks have made in terms of getting or approval from the FCC for things. And some of those are addressed in here. Kind of have some questions about that, but I also, don't really want to be the one to to hog the whole time. So if somebody else has some questions, they can start. I will step aside for a minute, but I would like to ask some at the appropriate time.
Well, let me go to Chris Hands. She did have her hands up about the same time you did. So Chris, did you have something?
I actually have several things, and I think that they're not necessarily anything that would keep me from approving this. I think it seems quite straightforward, but I have a lot of concerns about maintenance of equipment that utilities put in our areas where it is not always aesthetically pleasing, whether it's still working or not. And I really wish we could put some teeth in a way to get basically utilities to clean up after themselves, because Edelweiss, we have underground all kinds of things, and yet we have these utility boxes that just generally look awful. So that's my first thing, is maintenance and disposal of outdated or non-functioning equipment. And I think it is covered in there. I made note of several different places, but I just wish there were real teeth to make it happen. And then the second thing is who in our staff is going to take care of processing the supplemental applications, and who will do the inspections, because that sounds like a resource management issue to me.
I can answer that question. It's Chris Engel. Those would be processed through likely Public Works, likely Todd, our CIP right-of-way manager. He would be the one that usually coordinates with anything that occurs in the right-of-way. So when there's an issue with a box or work that's half done, or it's operating, or the process is moving a little bit slower than perhaps we think it should, generally he's the one that he's the point of contact that has contacts with the utilities that will come and help straighten up the right of way. That answer your question? So Public Works would be the ones that would administer it.
Okay.
Most likely.
And then do we really have, I mean, I still have an issue. It's not with AT&T, but I still have a utility issue that has never been remedied. And it's just so frustrating when things don't get really completed. So just saying that out loud.
Any other, that was kind of rhetorical. Did you have any other questions? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Ding.
I just wanted to make sure that that Councilwoman Hand's question about aesthetics is addressed. We've got kind of this regulatory scheme that's allowed by the state of Kansas. This is one piece of it. Another piece of it is Kansas, the legislature still enables municipalities to have some planning and zoning control over aesthetic issues, which is what I'm hearing you talk about. And in our zoning code, there are provisions in there that address what cell sites are supposed to look like, what pedestals, how they're supposed to mix aesthetically with the surrounding environment. So that's a complaint that I hear across many of my jurisdictions is, these ever increasing pedestals in the public right of way in front in people's yards. And so that is a place that in your zoning code, you can look to try and mitigate some of those impacts.
Very good.
And I can share that we have met several times. I think probably it's been over a year, but Chris Carroll, myself, the former city attorney, Brian Dyer from Community Development, Public Works Director. We've met and we've had conversations, as I'm sure they have with other communities, about the aesthetics, about the fact that we have some decorative light poles, and about just being mindful of trying to be inconspicuous in the right of way, as opposed to us having to just outright say no. We do want to find, I mean, the customers are residents, so I mean there is some sort of give and take there, but I will readily acknowledge that we've had these conversations, and AT&T has been at the table as we've talked about the possibility of trying to make sure that these things are as aesthetically pleasing as a pole can be.
I'm just here to add that I'm backing you up.
Very good. Mr. Caldwell.
Yeah, this agreement is specific to AT&T solely. And will there be other providers that come, and will we end up with multiple agreements when?
It's quite likely. I would imagine, yes, there'll be at least one or two carriers that will come behind, and they will be looking for similar type agreements.
Okay, and so we're not giving AT&T any type of exclusive rights?
No, not at all. They're just the first ones here. Now they might end up with some more prime real estate because they're the first ones here, but that's
only if they get here first.
Correct.
Because this is just the agreement. We're not yet placing any equipment.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So some other carrier could feasibly come in next week and want a same agreement and install before AT&T does, and not that any of that matters, but
it's possible. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Neal.
I guess if everybody's had the first round of questions, I kind of wanted to kind of approach this from sort of a overview, and then I have some specific parts of the agreement that I wanted to ask about, and just some general ideas of sort of AT&T's plans, if that's possible. I know that may fall outside the scope of this, but it is important to kind of look holistically at the whole idea of 5G infrastructure in our community, and sort of how that occurs without there being a land rush for the prime locations, and competition between the providers and then third parties who are trying to resell and things like that. So there's a lot of different issues here that I kind of wanted to talk about. But first of all, about the agreement, Chris, you mentioned 7 cities that were involved, and I kind of wanted to know which cities they were, and then who the primary folks were on the city side, and whether we were, whether our city attorney was one of the 7, or was in what way was involved. I also want to say that having gone over this agreement fairly comprehensively a couple of times, I think it's a very good agreement as far as what it does. I think there's a lot of good parts of it, and it's well written. So I do want to give whoever did it some kudos for that. But anyway, who was the?
I'll defer to the city attorney.
Steve Horner, who's kind of I would venture to say the resident expert in this field in the state of Kansas and local government law, took the lead. He's a deputy city attorney in Overland Park. He he would update others that he was taking the lead from, included certainly we were in the loop, Prairie Village. I can't recall who else was in it, but so I was in the loop, and Spencer Lau, an attorney in my office, for the 3 jurisdictions that I represent, and one of my jurisdictions, Westwood, approved it last month.
Okay. Councilmember Hand, you had your hand up. Was it a follow-up on that
I was just going to say in the worksheet, it lists the cities that they,
Okay.
It's 7. So I assume that's the 7.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I went straight to the agreement and forgot that it was there. So apologize. This maybe goes to the AT&T representatives. Is this as a model agreement for Johnson County? Hopefully, how does that compare to other similar agreements in either the state of Kansas or outside of the state of Kansas? Are you trying to get a similar? Is this a template from AT&T, or is this one that was negotiated kind of arm's length from start, or did it start from somewhere?
Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to address that. This is Chris Carroll on behalf of AT&T, Regional Director of External and Legislative Affairs for AT&T in Kansas. And joining me tonight is Mr. Paul Snyder, Snyder Public Affairs. AT&T has retained Snyder Public Affairs to assist in the rollout of these agreements throughout the state. There are, there's been some great questions asked tonight and some comments made, and Mr. Engel did a wonderful job of summarizing this, as did Mr. Dank. There were 7 cities that were involved intimately in the negotiation of this agreement. As Mr. Dank reported, Steve Horner, with the city of Overland Park, took a lead role for the municipal governments, coordinating with all the other cities at the time of these negotiations that took place over a period of months or maybe a year or so. And as of tonight, Merriam will be the 8th city in Johnson County to, assuming that you approve it, and I hope that you do, will be the 8th city in Johnson County to have passed this very same agreement since the 1st of December, the last, 90 days or so. There's been 7 other cities. I'd be happy to go over that list if you'd like. Particular list, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask if any of the cities had made any modifications to the master agreement.
They have not, other than specific wording as far as their city. But this agreement is the exact same agreement that the other cities have passed, being Lenexa, Olathe, Overland Park, Leawood, Prairie Village, Shawnee, Westwood, as you mentioned, Mr. Dank. Merriam tonight, and we're on the city council meeting for Leavenworth, the city of Leavenworth, tomorrow. Wednesday night, or Wednesday afternoon, I think, the city council in Wichita meets. This very same agreement is up before that council on Wednesday in the city of Wichita. We expect this agreement to be a model agreement for others. I would mention too that we may be the first wireless provider in your city, but we're not the first in the other cities that I named, or at least most of them, particularly Overland Park. I think they have 100 small cell nodes already. Steve Horner had mentioned to me a little over 100, I think, already. Sprint, now T-Mobile, and Verizon have taken a lead in the deployment of small cells. We're actually a little bit behind, and someone mentioned prime real estate. Mr. Engel did, I think. It's the first who gets, the first to get there to the prime real estate, I call it beachfront property, gets the site, so to speak. Now, AT&T is a little unique, a little different with respect to the other service providers, in that we have a wireline company, and we do have a franchise with the city of Merriam, and have had for many, many years. And we pay 5% franchise fees every month to the city for the revenues generated on the wireline and on our UVerse video services. So that franchise is separate. I might clarify that a little bit. The video franchise is a statewide franchise that we pay 5% on. The wireline franchise is a unique franchise for wireline services in the city of Merriam and other cities throughout the state of Kansas. Right. But this is, we're a little behind actually on the small cell agreement, because as I stated earlier, Verizon and Sprint, now T-Mobile, have already secured some of the infrastructure in various cities, Leawood, Overland Park, and a few other cities that we might like to have. Although, again, we're a little unique in that we have utility poles in the rights of way. And if at all possible, we would prefer to use our own structures, our own utility structures, to place these small cell nodes but that always won't be the case. That's why we need city infrastructure, your light structures, your light poles, and certainly your decorative poles. And when we met with Mr. Engel and Mr. Dyer, and I think Nicole was involved at the time as your city attorney, in those discussions, this came up, your decorative poles, and we will use the same pole provider, supplier that you use and purchase a new pole for you at our cost and install that at our cost in replace of a pole that we might select as an optimal location to offset some congestion on our network. These small cell nodes provide additional network capacity for where we're seeing congestion from our customers. There's a huge usage increase over the years of data, particularly data, and in certain areas of town, certain areas of the city. And we've identified 6 locations in your city that we need to place small cell nodes initially to relieve some congestion, to provide a better experience for our customers because of the demand on our network. And I don't mean to ramble. I know Councilman Neal has other questions, and I hope I've answered at least initially your concern or questions, Councilman.
Yeah, I appreciate the answers. One of the things that in my question that wasn't answered was possibly whether these agreements are similar or the same as in other states. And I'll give you the kind of a reason why I'm asking that question, because I know that through some of my work with the National League of Cities, there are some other states where some of the agreements may include some encouragement, let's put it that way, for co-location where possible. And this certainly doesn't preclude co-location, this agreement. That's the reason I was asking that question about other cities. I think other states, and whether this was a model across the country.
Generally speaking, yes. It is unique to Kansas in that Kansas municipalities were involved in the negotiation and in the input to this agreement. So they're generally the same as I understand it. I might have to defer specifically to our attorney to address that question, Councilman Neal. But generally, they are the same. And I remember, I think, a conversation that you and I had actually after I think it was a Shawnee Mission Education Foundation breakfast back a couple of years ago, where we had this very conversation. I think I met you for the first time there. And you asked a good question about co-location. These, unlike a macro site, a macro cell tower, like what you see near City Hall there, and other sites we have on rooftops, where co-location of multiple wireless facilities, multiple carriers, multiple service providers is feasible and certainly preferred. Co-location of more than one small cell node on a street light or traffic light or utility pole is generally not possible. And there's several reasons for this. I mean, first, because the small cell facilities can interfere with one another. These smaller antennas have kind of a unique propagation characteristic inherent with them that require increased separation to avoid such interference. And at the same time, the more limited space available on a utility pole or a street light or other poles that are typically much shorter than most poles used for the co-location of macro sites makes it really harder to find enough space on that pole or that structure to place a second small cell antenna at the height that small cells need to operate. And these, I might add, these small cells have a much shorter range, much more like 1,000 feet, no more than 1,200 feet, where a macro site has, several miles, multiple miles of reach because of their height and such. So some of you had mentioned, I think Councilwoman Hans, the aesthetic requirements. Our safety standards and aesthetics requirements are something that we're also concerned about, and these have to be approved by your staff, and we won't put one up unless it's approved by staff. And again, we use suppliers of your own structures today, and they all have to be approved anything that goes in your right of way, you have authority within the rights of way to control that. And so we have to abide by your ordinances and abide by your zoning codes but before we're even allowed to get the permit to place it. Hope that maybe answers your question.
Sir. Certainly.
Could I add one thing to that?
Sure.
So, you know, there are two sets of regulatory laws that cover this topic. There's the legislation that is adopted at the federal level under the Telecommunications Act, and then the regulatory guidance from the FCC. But then layered over the top of that are the legislative actions that the state of Kansas has taken, which you know, and there have been several rounds of bills on this, which layers on additional requirements to what the federal legislation requires. So, for example, on that co-location question, there's a specific statute that precludes municipalities on small cell sites from requiring or considering co-location. And that was passed in 2019, which was the legislation which really kind of fostered this whole discussion about moving away from franchise agreements to master license agreements. So, you know, state to state, you are going to have some differences because there's different legislation enacted at the state level, which would apply to these various providers.
That's true.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Actually, it's since I've been dealing with it for a long time. I'm aware of that, and I'm glad everybody else is now aware of that. One of the things that obviously legislation can change should there be new impetus for that at some point. So recognizing that we're under the jurisdiction of Kansas law as well, and co-location is not something that can be required in any way. There's nothing in this agreement, it appears to me, that would preclude the city from encouraging co-location where feasible if the other regulations allowed it and so forth. So that for that reason, I mean, the co-location language is all throughout this agreement, so it doesn't really cause a problem for me in that context. Obviously, co-location is one of those issues that if you're looking at the 5G is densification technology, which means that we're essentially putting in nodes infill nodes, so to speak, to provide additional access points and additional speed and throughput and so forth. What if a city such as Merriam were to be fully fitted out with 5G? It sounds like what you're proposing is to look at congestion spots and sort of selectively increase capacity there. But one of the concerns that I have just in general with infrastructure planning for things is that it's equitable, that, you know, we don't just provide the technology in areas of the city or cities where it's more lucrative for the provider. There's some level of equity for other underserved areas to also have access to the technology where possible. And I recognize that that's a tricky thing. But so so my question is, you know, we have various kinds of light poles. What, for AT&T to fully provide 5G services, what number of, of facilities, of small cell facilities would a city like Merriam likely see should you make it broad across the city?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I'm unfortunately not able to answer. Some of our mobility network CRAN engineers perhaps could. Initially, and when we go in with the 6 locations that we've identified as a need right now for congestion purposes or relieving congestion, those will be equipped with 5G, but I'm told by our network engineers on the mobility side is they won't be turned up just quite yet. They will all be turned up at a same time, whatever time that might be. Over time, over a period of time, you're going to need many, many more of these. To your point, Councilman Neal, the densification, and in order to get the speeds that come with true 5G, millimeter wave technology and what have you, where you're getting gigabyte type speeds wirelessly. And again, the reach is shorter. So you're having to have more of these in order to be ubiquitous, if you will, and the provisioning of services of these types of 5G type services, of course. And here I'm talking years now down the road, and autonomous cars, for example. I'll use that as an example. They have to communicate with one another. And our company has a separate organization that is working with the automakers on this technology so that cars don't run into people or don't run into each other. And so they're using this 5G technology to communicate. And you know, I don't know about you, but I want to be behind the wheel. I don't know that I trust the car driving by itself, but that's coming. Whether we like it or not, it may not be in our lifetime, and it may be. But this type of technology is needed. And so you're going to have a proliferation of these types eventually. One of the other councils that we were before on this agreement a few weeks back, someone had asked the question, or when will we see them in residential areas? And I really don't know. It will be several years before we see them in residential areas, I think. Because initially, at least our company is trying to relieve congestion and then supplement the macro sites with 5G technology, utilizing small cells. And so I'm not an engineer. I'm not even a network guy. So I know some of this stuff, but it's over my head.
Yeah, fair enough. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I was just trying to add some information that would be helpful. I think that because this is something that's emerging, but something which will become ubiquitous over a period of time, and I believe it'll probably happen faster than, like many things, faster than we sort of anticipate. But and therefore, what we decide in terms of these kind of agreements have a long life, even though at the moment they're relatively minor things. They might appear to be. I'll just move on to the kind of the next area that I wanted to discuss. One of the problems with 5G for elected officials is the prevalence of, in some cases, conspiracy theories and misinformation about RF emissions. And it is a situation where when things go up within a municipality and people hear bad things, whether or not they're accurate or not, they tend to call the city or their elected officials and say, hey, I've heard this is dangerous, and what can we do? Knowing as I do that, again, our hands are tied through the FCC in terms of using environmental concerns as a reason to deny an application for a site. In the agreement, you have the phrase "shall comply with all FCC regulations regarding RF emissions and exposure limitations." What are the current FCC exposure limitations, and what were they based on? I believe, I've been kind of preoccupied for a few months here, so I don't know if there's anything new, but the old information that I'm aware of was that we really haven't had any kind of FCC or industry testing that has been any guidance that we can cite. Do you have any either? What are the FCC standards, and then has there been any research that AT&T has done? I know that there are also potentially OSHA regulations and maybe internal regulations for safely working on these sites, requiring them to be shut down. So people will then ask, well, if the workers have to have it shut down, how far away should I be walking my dog and still be safe, that kind of thing. So I wonder if you could address that.
Yeah, great concerns, and the health concerns have been out there for at least 18 months or so. I had several city some mayors and several council members, and you may have been contacted by constituents of your own, where the form letters are sent out by conspiracy theories. To your point, Councilman Neal, I do know that our company and all the carriers, for that matter, have done tests of their own, studies of their own, on the health concerns that have been expressed by these so-called conspiracy theorists. The FCC has, I believe the FTC has, and I'm not quite sure, but I think I've read where the World Health Organization have done studies, because this isn't just unique to the United States, this is worldwide. Right. I remember here several months ago that Great Britain was encountering a number of terrorist, there were sites, small cell sites that were blown up. And I take you back right here in this United States, Christmas Day, you all remember Christmas morning, the bombing in Nashville in front of one of our central offices there. That was from what reports we've been given through our company channels, FBI and our corporate security folks, this guy was a conspiracy theorist. The New York Times did a study here a year or so ago, and I have information on that, and I can share that with Mr. Engel, and he could share that with you if you'd like. But the New York Times did a fairly in-depth study on these conspiracy theorists, and they track this back, believe it or not, to Russia. And this was fake news, if you will, and being perpetrated across the world. It was a great study. If you haven't seen that, I'd be happy to share that with you guys.
Yeah, I think it would be good to share it.
Yeah,
also,
I will do that.
I did see that, obviously, from, since it's kind of one of those things I'm interested in, but so it caught my attention when it came out. I guess what I'm asking, any information that you have, I would love to see it, because we're going to be facing those kind of questions here. And any kind of data that you have concerning this issue would be really helpful. And then the other part of it is kind of an ask. The FCC has been dragging their feet in terms of trying to establish some standards. As far as as I can tell, it's something that I think needs to happen, because if we can point to some definitive recent information that the FCC puts out, then I think that helps us in countering this to the extent that is possible. I mean, people just want to know if it's safe, and I totally get that, and I can't really answer that that well at this point. So I don't want to belabor that point too much. I kind of wanted to. I got some other ones.
I understand. I do have some information on the health concerns and some links to some studies and the New York Times investigatory report and article. I will get that tomorrow to Chris Engel and ask him to get that out, Chris, if you would, to the council. I think that will address many of your concerns. I don't know specifically the FCC standards that you speak of. I can look internally throughout our company and try to get some of that information and get that over to you.
I'd certainly appreciate that. And there's a couple of minor little things that these are like typos possibly that I wanted to kind of bring up in this. Section 8.1, the specifications. Should there be a period after the words applicable standards and before grantee shall be responsible? Is that two different sentences?
Ryan, can you address that? I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately.
Let me get
specifically. Section 8.1, did you say?
Yeah, 8.1. I mean, I don't know.
As many folks were involved in this, I'm surprised they missed it, but it could happen. So
well, I don't know if it didn't seem to have a meaning without the period there to me. So two separate thoughts.
Wait, I'm there. Where are you looking at, Councilman?
Grantee, it says it's
midway down. Grantee shall at its own expense.
Yeah, it's right. It's not midway. It's all of grantees attachments must comply with all applicable standards. Grantee shall be responsible for the installation and maintenance of its attachments. Those are two separate, I think, sentences. Kind of in the first third.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't. That's just a minor thing, but you know, just
yeah, it could be a period. Yeah, I think.
And in the final signed off copy, Ryan, if you want to make that change,
sure,
that's fine. Thanks, thanks for the catch.
Then the other one is 13.3.4. When we're talking about solely private benefit, and I'm assuming there. Now again, this would take some tortured thinking, but solely private benefit, where then the city is responsible. You know, there's some responsibilities for costs associated with that. And AT&T is a private entity, so I'm assuming that we weren't talking about AT&T. This was talking about a third-party private benefit, and I would suggest that maybe we add third-party before the word benefit, so it reads solely private third-party benefit. So it's just clear that we're talking about some third party, you know, here. I mean, it may be implied, so it may not be a big deal, but that's just one of those small things that. Because
yeah, I'm going to ask Mr. Snyder on the call. This was exactly the same language with the other cities, right? We didn't. You know, because Paul, I know you were coordinating with the other cities on this.
Yes, there were no changes made to the Merriam other than updating the fee resolution language.
So,
okay, well,
yeah,
I just, it might be, it's not really that big of a deal. I'm just, the intent, I assume is some third party involvement, and that's what the intent is, as far as I can read it. I don't have a problem. It just something
I think your reading of it is right. I don't know what private benefit would be. I mean, other than a third party.
Right. Well, a private party, you know, anyway, solely private benefit. I'm not sure what that meant. So yeah, that's why I asked that question.
Maybe if the council saw that with that clarification, maybe you approve it tonight, and Ryan, tomorrow we can get on the line with our attorney and with Mr. Snyder and kind of go over that language for the final copy for signatures, if you want to do that. I mean, I'm fine with
that.
Well, that's fine.
If you know, if you felt strongly about
it. Yeah, I'm not gonna object just on that alone. I just kind of wanted to clarify what that means. But the next one though is more important to me, and that's dealing with the fees. And we're talking, you know, this agreement recognizes that there's a dispute among essentially the parties between paying what we deem to be our fee structure versus what the Safe Harbor SCC fee structure, and gives you the option to pay either or. And so that's all good. And I like that. That's a good mechanism to, you know, get around the problem, with the exception of in paragraph 21.3.2, the very last sentence, it essentially limits that repayment of the difference when there's things finally adjudicated to 18 months. And from my standpoint, that does a couple of disincentive things. It's sort of a disincentive to go ahead and pay the full fee, whether or not you know, AT&T intends to. It makes the business decision different, and it also limits, you know, in limiting the potential liability, any impetus to, you know, resolve the dispute quickly is diminished by the fact that the liability is not increasing, significantly, other than the fact that you may be putting in more of these, facilities. So I would like to see that changed, either just to strike that last sentence or to put a different time limit on it than 18 months. Because I think,
I hear what you're saying. Speaking on behalf of AT&T, we couldn't agree to that. That there were probably more discussion between the attorneys on this issue than any other in that agreement. It was lots of give and take, and we all agreed. I see all the other cities, of course, agreed to that same fee structure. This had been appealed. The safe harbor, as you well know, the League of Municipalities, I believe, NCSL appealed that. It was overruled by the Ninth Circuit, and so the FCC order was substantiated and the appeal stricken by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal. So it has not been appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. And what we're understanding is it probably won't be. The Supreme Court probably won't take it. But that's what we're hearing. That's what our understanding is. You may have other information. But there were considerable discussions on that subject, and that was the agreement that we settled on. And I know, and I'm speaking for AT&T in this, we won't budge from that. 18 months is what it is.
Okay, well, that answers that question. I just thought, it was worth bringing up.
I don't but there was lots of discussion and a lot of give and take, and
kind of a red flag. So
sure, I get that. I understand. You're doing your job as the representative of your community, your cities, and your constituents.
I'm trying to. And then I guess this is the last thing that I wanted to kind of bring up, which is another area that we are, trying to provide some guidance at the NLC level on. Has to do with the data privacy. And one of the things that, this is kind of a little bit out there, but given that this is densification technology, given that we are looking at 1,200 feet distance, for example, between towers. In your technology, I'm going to ask a couple questions first, and then I'll kind of maybe go with what I was my main question. But what's the handoff technology when a mobile subscriber, for example, is connected to small cell? Is a technology that the handoff goes from small cell to small cell, or is which is what I would assume, or is it similarly to the way a larger handoff goes from tower to tower? And
good question. And I had the assumption too, it would be small cell. That's not necessarily the case. And again, I'm not technical, and so my explanation, it won't be very technical. But the use of small cells will be in conjunction with macro sites in the area, and the strongest signals, and they work interchangeably with one another. So they'll bounce off a macro site to a small cell, to a small cell, to a small cell, to a macro site as one travels down the road or so. So it's a seamless transmission,
right?
But bouncing off of both small cells and macro sites at the same time, or as needed.
But for example, a mobile user driving down the street will effectively, whether it's through the large cell, will be directed to the next cell. So I guess what I'm getting at is there's a lot of finer granularity of location data that will be generated about subscribers' movements. And my concern is that with this finer granularity of location data, what protections, if any, is AT&T considering in terms of alternative uses of this finer granularity location data? And how can we be assured that our residents, I mean, I know this is outside the scope of this, but that our residents, one of my concerns is location data is very, very critical and very, security, people leaving their homes at given time every day. There's all kinds of misuses of location data. And so to the extent that even it's generated, that there's some safeguards in place so that that data does not become sold in an irresponsible way. Yeah. Obviously you need that data to provide the service, but as we've seen with so many other companies, monetization beyond the base service is often a part of the whole deal. And that is a concern. Mm-hmm. Again, it's outside of the scope of this agreement, but it is a concern that I have. Yeah,
well, location data is also used, as you well know, Councilman, for public safety reasons.
Correct.
So uses, and it's very, very important. But we do not sell. Privacy of our customers, customer privacy is very, very important to us, as it is to our customers, and we do not sell that data, and won't sell that data. And we're on record of stating that. But yes, for public safety reasons, it is very important that it's captured and used for public safety reasons, to identify a particular location for an accident or what have you. And it's used for those purposes, but not for resale, not for advertising purposes or anything like that.
Okay, that's good to know. That's what I wanted to hear.
I think at this time I'm going to kind of step in. Mr. Neal, you've had quite a bit of time and a lot of
I'm done.
I'll ask to see if anyone else has any questions regarding this issue before we entertain a motion. Mr. Pate?
Yeah, I just had a question concerning one, like if AT&T looks at themselves, and there was some talk about being, the co-hosting on a tower that wouldn't work because of interference. If somebody else puts up a cell closer to you that starts creating interference, is that something that's just between the two providers? They're going to have to deal with that, or do we have any liability?
No, the city wouldn't have any liability, and I presume that would be the case, Councilman Pape, where the carriers would. To the best of my knowledge, that hasn't happened yet. But again, we don't have very many of these out, at least in Kansas. We've got lots of them elsewhere. But to the best of my knowledge, we haven't had interference with one another. They do use different frequencies. The carriers use different technologies, and so you don't have interference where there's, as I understand it, where if you're using TDMA versus CDMA type technology, Verizon versus AT&T, we use different technologies. Sprint used to use the same technology as Verizon. T-Mobile used the same technology as AT&T, and now I think Sprint is moving over to the platform and the technology that T-Mobile has always historically used. But that would be between the carriers. That would be worked out with the respective engineers, and we work with other carriers a lot, particularly those where we do co-locate on macro sites, on cell towers. But if there is interference with respect to small cells within so many feet, that would be incumbent upon the carriers to work that out between themselves.
And again, well, it may be an interesting question that has little or nothing to do with this agreement.
That's true.
Because we're talking about technical issues that involves things that the city of Merriam is not going to change or control when you look at the global picture. And obviously, if there's a problem represented by this kind of interference, that's going to be the people that are behind the technology. So rather than get far off on that issue, Mr. Neal, I think I'm going to go ahead and ask anybody else any questions. And I think we probably have enough information to make a decision to pass this forward or not. Again, I don't want to get into too far into the weeds on this, because most of the stuff that you're talking about, I don't understand, and I'm pretty sure I represent the council in that respect. And if they don't understand it, the citizens don't understand it. But I do understand why we're here, and it has to do with this agreement. Some of the nuances of the agreement have been discussed, and I'm pretty sure Mr. Carroll would say we've certainly given him his fair share of questions this evening. So with that, I would entertain a motion in a second. Anyone wish to? Chris Hands, you're up first.
Yes, I'd like to move that the council approve a small cell deployment and master of right-of-way license agreement with AT&T Mobility.
Motion, Whitney, take a second.
It's Councilmember Yodrich, and I second that.
Motion made and seconded. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Knapp.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
I'm going to say aye, but I would wish it was different, a little bit different.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Very good. Thank you, Mr.
Council,
Carroll.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Snyder, thank you for coming this evening. Now we're going to move to next item, which is the monthly financial report. Donna, you want to take over this part?
Sure. You should have received the January financial report. One thing to remember as you're looking at it, that the sales tax information is included is for through November of last year, since there's the 2-month lag. Again, we continue to be, down in sales tax, but only minimally. I think right now with 11 months of sales, we're 3.5% down, or around $350,000, which is obviously great compared to where we feared that we might be. And overall, I think we're moving along and progressing. We expect our auditors to come in and audit us here in the next couple of weeks. And once they're done, we'll be able to give you a complete 2020 picture. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions, anyone? Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brian Dyer, we're going to talk about community development update.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Brian Dyer, Community Development Director. Just update on the comprehensive plan process. The Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, those folks that are Merriam residents, business owners, folks that are interested in the process, that committee had their 8th and scheduled to be their final meeting. They had that last week. They reviewed a couple of revisions to the comprehensive plan based upon some public comments, also based upon your all's joint Planning Commission City Council meeting that we had earlier this month. And they approved those recommendations and recommended that the Planning Commission and City Council also approve the new comp plan. So the next step in that process will be a public hearing before the Planning Commission on next Wednesday, next week on March the 3rd. So that's the next step in that. Also, just a little bit more update on the Planning Sustainable Places grants, the agreement that we approved, you all approved earlier this evening. We're doing interviews with consultants at the end of this week. So that process continues to go forward for the Downtown Merriam PSP grant. We're hoping to have consultants for you all to consider at the end of next month, first part of April. And then also in regards to plans, we just sent off the new stormwater master plan that we have for the city of Merriam. That's to do with NPDES, the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. Essentially, it's the quality of our stormwater. We have to do a new plan, I believe, about every 5 years. And this is a really, between EPA and Kansas Department of Health and Environment, a really revised plan. And it's particularly in regards to the documentation we have to do, but we sent that off earlier this week. Also be giving you an update on that as we kind of get it nailed down a little bit easier to understand, and giving everybody an update on that process as well. And then the last thing I have is Bob's Discount Furniture, the store that's going in the northern part of the old hen house. They have submitted a building permit application for the improvements to that facility. So We're in the process. We just got it in, so we'll be doing the review on that building permit, and obviously we'll let you know when it gets issued. I'll be happy to answer any questions that any council member may have.
Have you heard of any prospects on the other portion of that building?
I have not. Site Centers has not given me any indications of who it might be.
Having not seen the plan, I'm curious. Obviously, there's one entrance, basically one entrance to the hen house store. How are they going to split this into two entrances?
Great question. Planning Commission at their meeting this month reviewed a revised final development plan for that whole storefront. So for the whole hen house storefront, as I know you're aware, had the main entrance on the north part of that hen house, and then the southern part had that canopy area for, I believe, maybe an old restaurant in there. So what Site Centers, Bob's Discount Furniture brought to the Planning Commission was a revision to those both facades. So they'll be putting new facades on the old hen house main entrance and a new facade on the old entrance that was the canopy entrance. So both those facades are very much, I think personally, a great improvement to the looks of that. It's going to, if your hen house said that kind of peaked facade on the north side, it's going to be more of a square facade that fits all the other facades, that fits better with the other facades there. So there'll be two storefronts when they get done with that.
I don't know whether, do you ever have a chance to talk to the people from hen house, or would you have any reason to talk to them?
No, I have not had conversations with hen house, no.
I'm going to mention this here, but I'm going to talk to the city administrator earlier. You know, when they opened up that business, they took a picture. I don't know if you've ever been in hen house, but they got this huge picture that's probably got 200 people in it that were there on the very first day that hen house opened up. And there were many council people and Merriam citizens in that picture. I would love to know what happened to the picture, because it doesn't look like they're coming back. And if there be any way we might be able to obtain that for historical reasons, it would be nice.
We can certainly make some inquiries, and we can see, we'll see what we can find out for you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Mr. Dyer, Chris Hans?
Sure. I'm ready to hear really good news about the old Kmart building.
No, we haven't had any applications or anything on that. We hopefully you know, as we all get out of this pandemic and start to see us climbing out of it, obviously there's a big hope that that'll also be an opportunity for folks to come in with plans and ideas for that.
Is the owner remain the same, or was there a change in ownership?
There's not been a change in ownership, still the same.
All right. That's what I expected. It is available too. You can look on the front of the,
yeah.
See it from KCI, I think. Okay. Anything else about community development?
Not this evening, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Engel, do we have any staff items this evening?
Just a couple items, just cover real quickly. One, just a reminder, governing body rules were sent out. That's a follow-through item from our retreat last year. If you have any questions about those, I want to thank Julie for putting those together, and Meredith. You can't really do a red line version. I think anybody that had an opportunity to look, because we've really kind of revamped them. So that's why we sent them out far in advance, but we would like to get those in front of the council sometime soon. So we're projecting to do that at the end of March. So please, if you get a chance, take a look at those. We will bring those forward and talk about some of the changes that are in the change memo. But just as a little legwork beforehand, if you have opportunity to look at those, that'd be great. Goals and objectives for the budget. Not that we don't have a good, nice, robust set of goals. And with 2020, we clearly there were things that we didn't get done that are still on the list to do. But we have heard from several council members about some ideas, and please forward those to Donna if you have anything. I think we'd like to roll those back out to the council at the next council meeting and get those formally approved so we can get those to department heads and start building the budget around those, whether they're current items or they're new items. We don't have to add new items, but just I want to make sure everybody's afforded the opportunity if there's something they'd like to see included on there. And then in terms of the assistant process, just wanted to let everybody know we had about 60 applicants for Meredith's job, former job. We've narrowed it down to about 10 highly qualified candidates that we've sent out questionnaires to further narrow it down to a more manageable interview pool. So that's where we're at right now. We haven't received those back, but we will likely be putting together some interviews, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and get some sort of closure and get somebody in there that'll not necessarily fill her shoes, but help us continue to improve on the good work that we've been doing for the last several years. So just wanted to provide an update for that. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
No questions. I do have one thing to add, just for the council. You'll be receiving in the very near future a questionnaire concerning our city administrator's performance over in the year 2020. And I'll be soliciting comments, suggestions, as I do on an annual basis. And then I'll be completing his review. So be expecting that in an email. We have no new business that I'm aware of. So we're at that point where adjournment is most appropriate, and Bob's is pretty eager to talk about what he'd like to do with that. So go right ahead, Bob.
Just for the record, I'm not that Bob on that building. So
you're not going to use furniture, or I'm not using.
That's not me. No, but I'd make a motion, Mayor, that we adjourn.
Very good. So do I get a second? Chris Hands.
I will if no one else will.
Okay, well, you got it. Motion's made and seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
See you all.
Good evening.
Couple of weeks.